You know the end of the Ark of the Covenant? With the Nazis and the Ark and the, don't look, that. Just with no Nazis and you listen instead. But it's still scary. Okay? Cool. PseudoPod, episode 970, April 4th, 2025. This week's story, At the God Show by Shannon K. Garrity, narrated for us by Scott Campbell, hosted by Alistair Stewart, with audio by Chelsea Davis. Hey folks, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alistair, your host, and this week's story is by Shannon K. Garrity and is a PseudoPod original. Shannon is a cartoonist and writer best known for Narbonic, Skin Horse, co-written with Jeffrey C. Wells, and the Willow Weep Manor graphic novels, which have art by Christopher Baldwin. She lives in Berkeley with a cat, a man, a boy, and 2 chickens. Your narrator this week is our own Scott Campbell. Scott searches for challenges that will increase his skills for the battle to come. The slosh pile underneath PseudoPod Towers is a worthy opponent. Scott started as an associate editor at PseudoPod in 2016. He became web wrangler in 2021 and ascended to assistant editor in 2022. He is an invaluable resource for not only his assistance with reviewing stories, but also helping to build all the blog posts and ensuring our websites and bios are up to date. He also writes, directs, and performs for the queer, in every sense of the word, cabaret, the Mickey Faust Club. He also writes, far too infrequently, at the official online home of the Sleep Deprivation Institute and pop culture website, needcoffee.com. He lives in Florida, and he has absolutely no pets. So get ready for the battle to discover who is truly best in show. And ain't that the truth?
At the God Show by Shannon K. Garrity. Narrated by Scott Campbell. 6:15 a.m. "It'll be Turnock the Fisher," Sheila overheard one pilgrim say to another. "Why did we bother coming?" "May the green damsel stitch your mouth shut until your blasphemy cease," said the other. "We come to honor her and reveal her glory." There was a silence as the two filled out their name tags. Then, "Where did you hear that from?" "Everyone's saying it. It always goes to the sanguine group, and this year Turnock is the sanguine with the buzz." "It wasn't a sanguine last year. It was an Amaratus. And look how that turned out. The judges will play it safe. It's all politics." Her companion snorted, whether in disbelief or reluctant agreement, Sheila couldn't tell. "I'm telling you, the fix is in." Sheila handed the pilgrims welcome bags and pointed out the tent where they could set their ark. Sacrificial group, big surprise. They were always the complainers. After the effort she and her staff, all volunteers she might add, put in to make this the high point of every village's liturgical year. Not that the gossip was entirely off the mark. Every year, certain teams pushed the limits around campaigning. Deals were swapped, hexes carved, but calling it politics offended her. Politics and religion were different things, or ought to be. A topless woman with a sheaf of rye over her head loomed into Sheila's personal space. "Your people have placed us next to the eyes of Abbe Yonyuk." "Is that a problem?" "A problem?" The woman drew herself up to full height, which with the sheaf came to a good 8 feet. "We are the Bibyeks. We find the eyes of Abbe Yonyuk heretical to an intolerable degree." "Ah." Here at least Sheila was on firm ground. "Is this your cult's first show? It is the first time the blind child has strewn entrails revealing that this be Viv's will?" "If you don't want this to be your last show, read the rules. Bald Hallow is neutral ground." "But the heresy of the eyes!" "We don't do heresy here. If your team can't get along, there are other places you can reveal your god." The woman huffed off, sheep bobbing. "She'll stay. Other places, yes. But around these parts there was only one show." 6:45 a.m. Pilgrims from the Hawthorne Shaming and the Secret Carnival bickered over who had booked the river trail for morning processional worship. Blood was drawn, in anger by a carnival harlequin, for sacrificial purposes by Hawthorne. Both groups served old gods that had been entered in the show since the days of stone counters. They should have known better. Sheila listened to their grievances, revised the schedule, assigned a non-denominational cunning woman to burn sage, and scooted off for coffee. A line had already formed at the coffee truck. Ahead of Sheila, a man in slapdash woad griped about the tradition, established after more bloodshed than those bickering Hawthorns and Harlequins could imagine, of holding the show in autumn. "It gives the death and harvest gods an unfair advantage," he said loudly enough that everyone in line was sure to hear. "They're looking their best at this time of year. Plus, it's gloomy. You know when they do the English show? Spring equinox." Sheila bit her tongue. She didn't have time to rehash this old argument. She had to get to Devil's Tower. 7:30 a.m. Sheila paced the pentagonal room at the top of the tower. Lord Arcady and the radio crew were late. She didn't expect flawless professionalism from the crew. Volunteers again, what could you do? But Lord Arcady was beyond reliable. He was one of the pillars of the show, as much a part of the celebration as the Feast of Hearts. Sheila glanced out the window. The red and gold glory of the treetops calmed her for a moment. The nerve of that man in the coffee line, calling this gloomy. Bald Hollow was hidden deep in the Hudson Valley. People drove from all over the country to see this foliage, and Canada even. People who didn't worship any kind of earth god had a better appreciation of nature than a man who, if she read the runes tattooed on his back correctly, claimed to run with the Wild Hunt. Some people you just can't please, but that man and the complainers at the sign-in table worried her. They were too dismissive, too disrespectful. The radio crew bustled in. Lord Arcady drifted behind, carrying the weight of authority lightly as ever. He wore a tailor's suit, and he wore it well. "Apologies for the delay," he said. "Time folded on us." It wasn't an unheard issue around showtime, but it was a serious one. "Which path did you take?" "Westward, through the Elder Gates." "That darn blamed cosmic group," to the volunteers, Sheila added. "The ley lines there connect to a meteoric standing stone. We get time distortions when it's charged up, which means someone was trying to use it to send a signal into space, against regulations, and within a forbidden circle. I could just kill them." She pulled herself together. "I'll take care of it. Right now we have to set up a broadcast." Lord Arcady inclined his regal head. "I have utmost trust in you." "Ditto." Sheila turned back to the crew. "Well, get the Lord mic'd up." One volunteer handed Lord Arcady a bottle of water. Another set up a laptop displaying a feed of the show circle. Lord Arcady's commentary would be broadcast over a local radio band, another feature of the show that seemed eternal. It wasn't, of course. The days before radio, there had been criers, and before that smoke, and before that birds. Lord Arcady had always been part of it, though. He was older than he looked. Lord Arcady launched into his broadcast, his lavender honey voice smoothing over all difficulties. He welcomed pilgrims new and old, thanked the organizers, and worked in a gentle pitch for donations. He spoke warmly of the entrants and their worshippers, the strength of their bonds. As usual, he indulged in a few fond anecdotes about his own deity, Maghang-Ham-Tan, without coming off as evangelizing. "In these days of megachurches and celebrity cults," he said, "faith can seem impersonal. Some even question if religion has meaning anymore. But not here. Here we raise our gods from mud and bone and serve them in the time-tested ways. Here we know what we give and what we gain. Wherever honest people gather around a beehive, a burial mound, a seaside altar, wherever life is traded for something greater than life, that old-time religion will be good enough for me." Sheila left Devil's Tower with one weight off her mind. Whatever else might go wrong, Lord Arcady's voice wouldn't waver. 7:40 a.m. Sheila heard the shouting before she reached the standing stone. Pilgrims from 5 or 6 different teams, judging by the mix of costumes, stood arguing. "What is this?" Sheila called. Half the pilgrims, the half that recognized her, turned to plead their cases. The other half went on shouting at each other. "A blatant violation of the bylaws!" A lanky man in a t-shirt reading Malgame semifinals waved a phone in Sheila's face. "Good gravy, he downloaded the regulations." "Prayers must be directed at the team entrance only, within sanctioned areas only, and may not include the white or green ceremonies or exceed a magnitude of 36. "It wasn't us," a furtive youth undulated. "This is persecution, both noisome and fetid." "Well, who did it then?" The man with the t-shirt pointed at a car battery and a tangle of copper wires at the foot of the stone. "Someone with a so-called deity in space, that's who." "Persecution!" Dealing with the cosmic group was awkward. They'd been part of the show since the founding, but they weren't gods exactly. They were, at least by registered pedigree, extraterrestrials, elder beings for whom the Earth was a marvel to be flicked to and fro and at last chucked into the darkness of a great cosmic game of five-holes. Yes, it was impressive, but was it divine? The arguments went back and forth every year. "They're not purebred gods," said pilgrims from the other groups. "They're more powerful than half the true gods in the competition," said pilgrims from the cosmics, usually insulting someone's twiggy dryad or barely ascended priest king. "That still doesn't make them gods," said the other pilgrims. "Are you sure?" said the cosmic pilgrims. "For all we know, all gods are great old ones, and what you call divinity is just another frequency of the color out of space." At which point everyone usually gets offended, and the staff had to run around soothing egos and nullifying jinxes. What no one ever brought up, though everyone knew it, was that the Order of Nargartlep out of Cape Cod was one of the oldest teams and one of the biggest donors, and Nargaktep was a cosmic entity. It was just the usual eruption of bad feelings. So why did it feel dangerous? "Everyone take a breath." Sheila shot a meaningful glance at the man with the t-shirt who had been reaching for a conjure bag at his belt. "If there's been a rules violation, we'll track down who's ever responsible." "The staff's biased," shouted the cosmic kid. "You!" He jabbed a finger into Sheila's face. "Probably served one of those squalid and squamish earthly idols." A gasp rippled through the group. The cosmic kid shuffled his feet defensively. "Yeah, I said it," he muttered, avoiding everyone's gaze. "Squamish! Go ahead and be offended." "It's not that," said a woman with red threads rolling into her locks. "It's not about being offended." "I'm pretty offended," said a man on the back. "The staff serve no gods," said the woman. "By compact, they're unbelievers." "Well, agnostics, technically," the man in the t-shirt said under his breath. "It's the only way the show can work." "Anyway, that's Sheila," added a man Sheila recognized as the clay worker from Crawford's farm. "If anyone's impartial, it's her." "Sheila doesn't believe in a darn thing," someone agreed. The tension broke. Some of the other cosmic pilgrims made the kid apologize. Sheila made a show of checking the wires, though she didn't expect to learn anything. She'd go to a scryer for that, probably Terry. They always brought their gear along. She asked for the time even though she had her phone, which had the attendant effect of reminding all the pilgrims they had places to be. Crisis averted. But it felt like the trouble had just begun. 8:25 a.m. By the time Sheila did her pre-show rounds, the group preliminaries were almost finished. In the psychopomp tent, the judge were clustered around a few final arcs, double-checking the entities inside for divinity, health, and group standard confirmation. Katrina, an anthropology professor from Maris, known for her by-the-book standards and eye for an aura, gave Sheila a quick thumbs up. Moreover, a group of cloaked pilgrims were packing up its arc and casting apologetic glances toward a volunteer nursing a withered hand. Cursing a judge meant instant disqualification. It wasn't just about the judge's safety, Sheila always said, but the entrant's well-being. A wrathful god was a stressed, unhappy god. Over in the sanguine tent, the preliminaries were all over but the screaming, as the saying went. Accurately enough, as a few groups were already busy with ceremonies of either celebration or penitence. It was hard to tell the difference with blood gods. Sheila noted ribbons around a stone ark carved with jaguar heads, a black wooden box, and a clockwork contraption with stilettos jutting from the lid. No big surprises then. Perdnock the Fisher won best in group. Sheila turned to leave and went to find a shape blocking her way. It stepped into shadow and became an indeterminate, clean-cut man. He smiled, showing perfect teeth. "My group would like to apply to the show. Not this year," he added quickly. "We know it's too late. I'm here to make connections." Sheila took in his smooth cheeks, his iron jeans. She was pretty sure she had him pegged. "I see, Mr.
Josh."
"We don't take unsolicited applications or uninvited guests. Anyway, Mr. Josh."
"Just Josh."
"Mr. Josh, am I guessing you represent a major church?"
"Certainly, we have only a few branches."
"But you're a splinter sect of a larger group? You worship one of the, big players?" Those teeth again.
Oh, yes, ma'am."
"Then you don't qualify. I'm sure your god is too important to compete in pageants with little village deities anyway." Flattery often did the trick with these types.
"Our Lord, yes. But we're looking into growth opportunities, thinking outside the ark."
If this was a joke, neither of them laughed. "Mr. Josh, I have to be fast. One, this is a divine trial, not an evangelizing opportunity. Two, none of the major world deities meet group standards. They're too synchronized."
"Eh?"
"They're mashed together from dozens of different belief systems. That's how the big gods got big. They're mongrels. This is a purebred show. And three, the nature of the show being what it is, we can't permit entrants that have trouble getting along with others. Aggressive monotheist entities are impossible to handle in the ring, and we all know that your god is a jealous god." The man stared for a moment, then laughed.
"Oh, no. Did you think I was a Christian? No wonder you've been so hostile."
A business card appeared in his hand. Sheila took it. Embossed letters read, "Executive Empowerment Seminars, Human Optimization and Excellent Training. The Triangle System." Sheila looked up. "I don't get it."
"We're not a church. We're a corporation."
"And you're here because?"
"Well, we're also a cult. One of the fastest growing in the country by recruitment rate. You'd be amazed what people will do in exchange for business success and, as significant side benefits, a positive personal mindset and weight loss guaranteed within 3 months of taking the brand."
Sheila shoved past him. The man followed her out of the tent.
"I'm offering you a chance to synchronize."
"I don't have time for this. If you're a cult, what do you worship?"
"Profit in all its forms."
"That's not a god." "How many of your entrants are imagos of Mammon or Midas? How many golden calves in these tents?" "Money and religion are different things. Or ought to be. Who told you about us, Mr. Josh?"
"It's hard to keep secret these days, Sheila."
"I didn't tell you my name."
"No, I don't think you did."
Mr. Josh focused the full force of his grin on her, as if waiting for a response. When he got none, he looked away. Katrina saddled up. "We've been getting complaints about that guy all morning. Did you tell him his team can get his invitation rescinded for aggressive evangelizing?" "He wasn't invited. Call security on him." "You're sure? Most of the red smocks are stationed out around the circle for when the goat comes out." "The goat already?" Sheila checked her phone. "Sugar! It's almost 9. I have to get down there." Crashing through the hazel path that was the quickest way to the circle, Sheila fumed at Mr. Josh for wasting her time. That's all it was, a waste of time. The show will never bow to big money, big religion, or any unholy combination of the two. Still, Mr. Josh bothered her. Not his words so much as the fact that he was there at all. 9:45 a.m. Sheila's hurry was for nothing. The opening ceremony started late. A combination, according to the text agitating her phone, of an unusual number of minor scuffles and the big problem everyone had known to expect, the problem of the goat. By tradition, every show opened with a demonstration of the previous year's winner, but last year's Best in Show had gone to the triple-horned goat of Pick Rock Ridge, a rowdy fertility god whose poor ring discipline had been made up for in the Emeritus group judges' eyes by his shaggy haunches, priapic display, and Oregon aura. That darn aura. The goat had been so excited to have the blue ribbon pinned to his beard that he had released wave upon wave of erotic radiation, sparking one of the largest, messiest sacred orgies in show history. In the aftermath, the trouble wasn't with the human participants, except for a few teams that complained about having to find new virgins. The trouble was that the goat's aura had inspired even the gods. For months afterwards, litters of mixed-breed deities kept turning up in woods and marshes and small farming towns, hopelessly synchronized and useless from a competition standpoint. Sheila and the other volunteers had to adopt them out to local communities. A synchronized deity was just as good as a purebred, she insisted. If you weren't planning to show it, you could still curse foes or fertilize crops together, but finding believers for unwanted gods was an uphill battle these days. As the delay stretched to the better part of an hour, the tension in the crowd could be felt like an evil eye. Sheila stood in the shade of the barbecue stand, scanning the bleachers, telling her stomach that if it settled, she would reward it with one of Amrish's venison skewers. When at last the goat's team, naked save for animal masks, filed into the circle, the murmur that arose was a mixture of relief and heightened anxiety. Sheila braced herself as the worshippers assumed formalized, if rude, positions. She didn't have time for an orgy. To her relief, the goat manifested only long enough to strut once around the circle, displaying the anatomical features that had won him the blue ribbon. He let out a triumphant bleat as his team kissed his feet and other available parts, then vanished in a rain of rose petals, which was actually nice. Sheila didn't realize how tense she'd been until she saw the blood on her palms from where her nails, manicured from the show but already chipped, had dug in. Quickly she wiped her hands in the dust of the show circle. The show began. 10:30 a.m. The junior division went first. Watching the under-18 pilgrims worship their hand-raised godlings always put the crowd in a good mood. Sheila smiled as a group of Appalachian teens animated a scarecrow and a boy in a Sunday suit offered berries and flowers to something snarling in a pet carrier. The first adult category to show was the Apotheosis group, a unpredictable bunch. An immortal elevated to divinity qualified as an apotheosis, which meant everything from sacred trees, seldom entered because they were fussy to transport, and animals to, more and more often, cult leaders raised to godhood. That last category had become trendy, and Sheila fretted that it would lead to careless rush ascensions. Popularity had nearly ruined corn gods back in the day. The team that won Best in Show entered carrying an herb-bedecked litter. On it sat an ascended man who seemed to consist entirely of wild eyes and wilder hair. Sheila thought he looked hardly worth worshipping. But every god deserves a believer, the show's welcome pamphlet reminded pilgrims. Sheila had written that herself. Terry had laughed and reminded her that she didn't have a god. "The rest of you can do the worshipping," Sheila had said. "I have the show." The winner vomited snakes, listed coos of admiration from his team. Sheila applauded politely. Apotheoses weren't her thing. Next came the Potnian group, the nature gods, a reliable crowd pleaser. Sheila wished she could stay to get a good look at the group winner, which seemed to be a carpet of fungus covering its pilgrims, but there wasn't time. As long as there weren't any fires to put out, she needed to talk to Terry. 11:55 a.m. "Sorry," said Terry. "I wasn't reading anything. Spritzer?" "Why, no slow me down." "More for me, then. I got canned coffee, that'll do you." "Coffee I can use." Sheila leaned across the folding table on Terry's Airstream and squinted at the cards. Terry read ordinary playing cards, tossed around in a pattern known only to themselves, but it worked, usually. Terry plunked down a can of wine, a can of coffee, and a dead pigeon. Let's see if we can't focus our third eye, Titch. Swift snap, the pigeon's head was gone. Terry's practiced fingers traced blood across the cards. Well, do you see the standing stone now? I see the stone. I see the electric charge. But I don't see the stone's power going anywhere. Just up and out. If someone was trying to summon something, it was a damn sloppy effort. Who did it? That's what I really want to know. Terry cracked the can of wine. Reply hazy, ask again later. Sheila tried the coffee. It wasn't good, but she wasn't picky. A guy called Josh snuck onto the showgrounds. Here's his card. Anything? Terry fingered the embossed text, leaving bloody streaks. Yeah, that's a cult with a lot of dark energy. Got that void of, insatiable hunger vibe. How'd he find his way here? Terry snipped the card. Dunno. Might not be supernatural. I wouldn't pick up vibes if he just followed a rumor or pulled info off, what do you call it? The dark web? The ancient mysteries ain't as mysterious as they used to be. Don't I know it? Sheila took another gulp of coffee. I have to admit, I was hoping for more. It's more art than science, my dear. What are you looking for? I don't know. Something's off. Everything's off. Terry grabbed a wet wipe. Maybe it's not about what's there. Maybe. Sheila's phone buzzed. Seconds later, she heard the screams. High noon. Screams during the sacrificial group display were nothing to worry about, but these weren't the healthy screams of a god being ceremoniously murdered. These were the screams that turned out of people on fire. Non-sacred fire. The barbecue stand was ablaze. Fire spread across the bleachers. Sheila fought her way through the crowd, trying to reach the show circle, only later realizing how dangerous that was. A man in a jaguar skin slammed into her, stared wildly, and stumbled off. A Viviac ran past her with her sheaf of rye trailing fire. The Apotheosis Group winner wailed for his litter carriers. Pilgrims scattered every which way. This was wrong. In all her years at the show, Sheila had never seen anything so wrong. The pilgrims should be running as one to the arks. They should be running to their gods. How could they forget what they loved? 12:30 p.m. By the time Sheila reached the show circle, rage had burned away fear. Get out here! She screamed at nothing. I know you did this. Own up to it! Katrina ran up. There was an accident. Someone on the sacrificial team fooling around with their sagebrush torch. Fooling around? She spun on her. What kind of pilgrim fools around with ceremonial fire? You know how people are. Sheila grabbed Katrina by the wrist. I know these people. I know when something's wrong with them. You're hurting me. I bet I am. Blood on my palms, shed for one greater. You're not Katrina, are you? You're not making sense. I called you and you came. You must want to brag. Well, show me what you are. Katrina's face twisted into a smile. A haze passed over Sheila's vision, and she was holding Terry's wrist. Couldn't see a thing, could I? Terry smirked. Did you really believe that? You're not Terry either. The Terry thing tried to yank itself free, but Sheila held on. The air turned yellow with smoke. She coughed. When she opened her eyes, Lord Arcady faced her. Surprised? He said. Not buying it. Who are you, really? It was getting hard to breathe, hard to see, but Sheila tightened her grip. Lord Arcady snarled and clawed at her wrist. She held on. And there she was, a blushing grin girl, fresh and sweet in autumn. "The child greening," said Selah. "How do you know my name?" "I know it, and I bind you with it." Sheila turned around from the girl long enough to shout at two red smocks racing by with fire buckets. "Get everyone whose gods can summon rain or suppress oxygen, and tell them to get praying!" The girl struggled again, but weakly. Sheila had bound her with blood and spoken her true name. The show had taught her many things, but above all it taught her how to handle gods. "I never forget a winner," she told the girl. "You won best in Potnian group back when I was your assistant Red Smock, which was a long time ago, but not that long." "I'll curse you!" "No, because first, I don't think you can, and second, you're the god of an apple orchard in Elmira. I remember your team demonstrating very nasty things they did to ensure a good harvest, but personally, I just could not eat apples." Thunder cracked the sky. The smoke in the air swirled around them. "You underestimate me," hissed the girl. "Apples embody so much. Knowledge, for starters. And that's what you've been spreading, huh?" All of a sudden it was clear. It was written on the god's face, small and fierce and resentful. "I showed a novice torchbearer that impressing a girl with fire tricks was better than honoring his weakling god. I sent directions to a greedy cult, knowing they'd make a nuisance of themselves. I shocked the standing stone to expose the violence these pilgrims can barely conceal, and I spread word of the show's corruption." "You won!" "I won best in group," lightning flashed, as it tended to do with dramatic moments for gods. "Tygon the Skinless won best in show, and all he did was eat teenagers up in the Pine Barrens." "The Sanguine judges thought he had good ring presence," Sheila muttered. Thunder rumbled again. Rain fell, hot and thick like the sweat of a long day. "It wasn't enough. My people lost faith. Some even went off to worship Tygon. That wasn't the show's fault. We always say a god is for eternity, not for a solstice." Sheila had written that one, too. "Wait, are you saying you have no worshippers?" "Exactly!" The god's eyes flashed gold. "I'm nearly powerless. I had to do all this myself, with my own incarnate form, like a mortal. But it was worth it to kill your show." This was why Terry hadn't been able to sense anything. The meddling might have been done by a god, but it was mundane. Sheila had the sudden odd image of an apple dryad contacting business seminars and hooking wires to a car battery, but she didn't have time to linger on the notion. Dragging the child behind her, Sheila marched for the tents. Around them, figures sloshed through the rain, tamping down fires and attending the injured. Soon Sheila would have to make herself seen, but not yet. "And I killed it," the god cried. "Look around you. A few hard truths and Bald Hollow is in ruins. You won best in group. An insult!" Sheila could barely get the words out. Her heart was too tight. "It's an honor just to be nominated." She dragged the struggling god to the mess tent, where, unless the show truly was dead, the Feast of Hearts was being prepared. A volunteer met her at the entrance. "Who's in the feast tonight?" Sheila asked. "We don't even know if there's going to be." Amrish appeared behind the newbie. "It's okay, Jackie. This is Sheila." "Hi, Amrish. Who's on the block?" Amrish turned to survey the cooking, cleaving, shouting, and slicing behind him. 6 volunteers from Sanguine teams, a couple of failed candidates from the For Your Mysteries, a cop who got too close to Oak's Isle, an evangelist security picked up this afternoon." A spray of blood spattered against the side of the tent. They weren't kidding when they called it a mess hall. "Make sure there's a feast tonight." Amrish shrugged. Who's going to stop us? From behind Sheila came the sound of bleachers collapsing and a chorus of screams. "Thanks. At least someone understands." The child, grinning, bit Sheila's arm. She ignored her. "Think you can fit one more on the spit?" "Of course." "Set the heart aside for me. For later." Sheila walked away before the child started to scream. She didn't want to hear it. It was always hard when an entrant had to be permanently disqualified. And she had a soft spot for the Patian group. Besides, there was work to do. It might happen after the longest delay in 100 years, but the show must go on. She put the fires out. She ordered the rain dances replaced with clear sky asanas. She reunited every ancient with its pilgrims. She got the finalists back into the show circle, their teams ankle deep in mud, and she drew an audience around them. Turnock the Fisher won Best in Show. Midnight. After the celebrations had ended, after the pilgrims had departed with their arks, after the last Soma worshipper had been escorted to the cool-down tent for orange slices, Sheila knelt in the center of the show circle. In a few hours, as soon as there was light, she'd catalog the damage. The morning cleanup crew would need marching orders. She had to salvage waterlogged paperwork and compose emails and schedule purification rites and correct misspellings on a couple of ribbons. Some of those runes were tricky. And there was the larger crisis of faith, the doubt that child greening had sown. Or maybe she had nurtured a doubt that was already there. But this came first. Sheila grilled the god's heart over coals. It was entwined with leaves and burning smelled of applewood. When it was ready, she prostrated herself, belly in the mud, hands to the smoke in the sky. "This is for you," she whispered. "I do it all for you." Pilgrims showed their gods, and that's as it should be. But Sheila had the show. She ate the heart, savoring its tartness, and began to plan for next year.
Persecution both noisome and fetid. That's how you complain. That's right up there with the skids in Letterkenny or with devour feculence from the most recent season of Severance. It also becomes, as we get to the end of the story, an expression of part of an act of devotion to the one business that no other business is like. The business of show. Everything in this story is a devotional act, even the story itself, and walking through what I see here is like walking through the center of a slowed down explosion of joy, horror, front of house stuff, and techies who have seen some shit. The base level of devotion is, oddly enough, the gods themselves, and the fact they're being put forward for competition at all. That's not just devotion, that is faith with a capital F, that is fanaticism. The unshakable belief that your god wins in a fight, and you're more than happy to test it. Now that is horrifying all by itself, but it becomes horrifying and poignant the same way that every combat sport is horrifying and poignant, as you watch both competitors come down to the ring, or the cage, or the mat, absolutely convinced that they will win, and knowing that one of them is wrong, and is about to find out. Then there's the show itself, and what it represents. Show business is one of those terms that covers, how appropriate for this story, a multitude of sins. You are participating in show business now. So are we. I've been participating in show business my entire adult life in various forms. I've been a techie, I've been a stage magician, I've been a security guy, I've been a leafleteer. All of them show business, none of them glamorous. All of them, even the leafleteer, fun. Or at least fun enough. Because that's how it gets you. That's the act of devotion that the god shaped like a stage asks of you. Just have a little fun. It's even better if that fun is effort too. A little hit of dopamine, just cut with some sweat. A little catharsis as a treat. And the whole time you hear just enough applause. The whole time you hear maybe this time getting a little louder every time, but never quite loud enough. The devotion is both the hit and the side effect. The benediction is the damnation. We keep going because it feels good, and then we keep going because it will feel good, and then we keep going because it used to feel good, and then we keep going because it doesn't feel good, but stopping feels so much worse. Faith not as comfort, but as obligation. We have always lived in the castle. Mass doesn't count unless it's in Latin. And then there's the final act of devotion, the one we're all carrying out. The story God manifests once again, and we devote ourselves to it for 45 minutes. What is a podcast but a ritual? What is a story but a prayer? What is art but faith persisting? That is where the horror and the hope lie in this story for me, because there will always be another show. And we wouldn't have it any other way. Brilliantly done. Thank you, everybody. On to the subject, as always, of subscribing and support. PseudoPod is funded by you, our listeners, and we are now formally, professionally, officially a non-profit. One-time donations are gratefully received and much appreciated, but what really makes a difference is subscribing. A $5 monthly donation gives us more than just money. It gives us stability, reliability, dependability, and you would be amazed how much binding salt $5 can buy you. It's not enough, but it's a start. If you can, please go to pseudopod.org and sign up by clicking on Feed the Pod. If you have any questions about how to support EA and ways to give, please reach out to us at donations@escapeartists.net. If you can't afford to support us financially, there are two things you need to know. The first is, that's entirely understandable. Times are hard and are getting harder. And the second is that if you can't support us financially, perhaps you could donate some time. Please consider leaving reviews of our episodes or generally talking about them on whichever form of social media you are obsessively doom-scrolling this week. I'm trying to limit myself to just Reddit, which is mostly arguments about films for me, and Blue Sky, which is mostly horror. PseudoPod is on Blue Sky now. You can find us at pseudopod.org. We also would love to see you there. Seriously. Especially right now, anything which is a nice conversation is a conversation we'll welcome. Also, if you like merch, you can support us by buying hoodies, t-shirts, and other bits and pieces from the Escape Artists Void merch store. The link is in various places, including our pinned tweet on Blue Sky, which, one more time, is at pseudopod.org. All the other shows are on there too. Tell them we said hi. PseudoPod is part of the Escape Artists Foundation. That's a 501c3 non-profit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Download and listen to the episode on any device you like, but don't change it and don't sell it. Theme music is by permission of Anders Manga. As is sometimes the way, the calendar is in a bit of flux at the moment. Right now, our story next week is Tree of the Forest 7 Bells Turns the World Round Midnight by Cherie Renee Thomas and narrated by our own Primi Mohammed. Chelsea's back behind the desk, I'm back in front of it, and we'll see you then. And we leave you with this quote from Show Business by Hilltop Hoods. Wharton quits show business? What kind of low is this? We'll see you next time, folks. Until then, have fun.
An arm appeared from nowhere on the shape, seemingly projected like the pseudopod of a protozoan.
It's a pseudopod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.